Life aboard early polar exploration ships was often long and lonely. Sailors plying the ice in some of the planet's most inhospitable regions were gone for months, if not years, and there were few things to lighten the mood day after freezing day. But Harry McNish, the Scottish carpenter and master shipwright on the HMS Endurance, brought some joy with him in the form of a tiger-striped tabby cat named Mrs. Chippy. Mrs. Chippy was actually a male cat, but got his name because he followed McNish around everywhere like a doting spouse. And Chippy was British slang, affectionately used to describe carpenters who created a lot of wood chips as they worked their magic. Everyone on the Endurance loved the intelligent and good-natured Chippy, and he constantly impressed the crew by catching rats and mice that got into the ship's stores, climbing the rigging like a salty able seaman, and walking along the ship's narrow rails, even in the toughest of seas. They loved him so much that when he fell overboard one night, they turned the Endurance around to rescue the cat from the frigid waves. If the Endurance rings a bell, that's because it was the ship captained by Sir Ernest Shackleton on his famous expedition to Antarctica in 1914. This is the voyage in which the Endurance got trapped in the ice and was slowly crushed, stranding the ship's complement of 28 men for nearly 2 years, while Shackleton and a small team, including McNish, rowed 800 miles in a small lifeboat to find help. It's one of history's greatest adventure stories, because unlike so many other doomed polar missions, Shackleton got every single one of his men back home safely. So please keep that in mind, given what I have to tell you next. Faced with keeping more than 24 men alive in some of the most inhospitable places on Earth, with scant shelters and little food, Shackleton had to make some brutal choices. There was simply no way to justify giving valuable rations to an animal. On October 29, 1915, Shackleton ordered that the ship's complement of sled dogs, as well as Mrs. Chippy, were to be shot. The crew doted over Mrs. Chippy in his final hours, giving him lots of love and even fed him his favorite food, sardines, from their dwindling rations. Some historians think that the sardines were laced with a sleep-inducing drug. Shackleton wrote in his diary, "This afternoon, the pups and Mrs. Chippy, the carpenter's cat, have to be shot. We could not undertake the maintenance of weaklings under these new conditions. The carpenter seemed to feel the loss of his friend rather badly." McNish's relationship with Shackleton eroded pretty quickly after that, and he never forgave his captain for ordering Mrs. Chippy's death. Before McNish died, destitute in 1930, one of the last things he reportedly ever said was, "Shackleton killed my cat." McNish was buried with full naval honors in an unmarked pauper's grave in Wellington, New Zealand. 30 years later, the New Zealand Antarctic Society added a headstone, and in 2004, the public raised the necessary funds to place a life-sized bronze statue of Mrs. Chippy atop the grave, lounging just as if he was still curled up on McNish's shipboard bed. Stay curious, my friends.